You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. Tonight, I am feeling young and dynamic. What's my secret? Well, I have assembled the oldest possible available Missed Apex panel, so tonight I am the sweet summer child of the crew, surrounded by the Missed Apex uncles. So tonight we'll ask, have Andretti scored a killer blow by hiring Pat Symonds from under Liberty's nose? We'll discuss why Aston Martin are running out of time to turn their season around. We'll marvel as McLaren pull out a Monaco corker of a livery and say to Ferrari, that's not a special one-off livery. This is a special one-off livery. And we'll also wonder why Alpine are so relaxed about their driver lineup, even as the vultures circle above the corpse of their 2024 campaign. Looking forward a little bit, we have our Monaco review at 8 p.m. on Sunday. Now, with such a content-packed schedule, we have a little squad rotation. So Stuffeyy will be looking after you on Sunday with Matt, Brad, and Jules. They'll be picking over the bones of the action of the race. Obviously, Monaco never pops, but they always have fun on the Monaco review. Then midweek, we've got our NASCAR special. Matt and I got invited to hang out with the 2311 team. I know it's not F1, but we had unbelievable access, and I'm desperate for you to just see it through my eyes a little bit. We had some amazing, insightful interviews. I know there's not F1 in the title, but I really, really hope you'll give it a chance and tune in. And then next Sunday, we're going to try something a little bit different, and we're going to start ranking championship wins by order of difficulty. But tonight, we bring you the news. Doop, 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 doop. Big dirty news. Turns out my bumper audio isn't set up, but I might get some help from Matt. Trumpets. Matt, you'll have to sing all the bumpers tonight.
Sure, because I'm good at singing. That's why I played trumpet.
Exactly. And we have a top video person. We've got Uncle Steve joining us. Hello, Steve.
Hello there. Should we start calling you Ricky Bobby, or
yeah,
since you've fallen in love with NASCAR?
Shake and bake. What have I not been honest with people? What have I said to get me to say positive things about your team, series, or nation state? Invite me to a place and give me stuff. I've been so honest, it's unreal. And we've got from my second home, Denmark, Kristian Pedersen. Hello, Kristian.
So you just want them to go around now?
Just go round in circles. I want competition cautions. I want, points awarded halfway through the race. And by the way, it isn't just turn left. They have road circuits, you know. So ignorant, you F1 fans.
I know.
Okay, let's get into a bit of news then. Matt, bit of a coup for Andretti. What's going on?
Well, they have done the thing that maybe they should have started out doing, and they have been doing kind of behind the scenes, is they just went out and headhunted someone who has been pivotal to Formula One and Liberty Media and their rebuilding of the sport, and said, maybe if we just hire this guy, they'll let us into their sport.
And even if they don't let him, even if they're not going to be quick about letting him into the sport, he's got all the secrets, hasn't he? He knows exactly what's going on.
So one of the key things here is that Pat, sorry, I don't know why I'm stalling on the name, but one of the key things here is that Pat Symonds has been involved in working for Formula One since 2017. So has been involved with the new regs as they've come in. So has he found some kind of, like, he's got some loopholes that he can bring to Andretti? I want to know how that conversation went, Matt, where they go, we want you over. What's the motivation? Is it the loopholes in the regs that you might be able to share with them? Is it just a big thumbing their nose at Liberty Media to say, hey, we've got one of your top guys, you can't now not let us in, at the same time as the US government is putting pressure on F1 for not letting them in?
I got to say, carrot and the stick is a classic tactic. And the answer, obviously, to Liberty's woes is if you let Andretti in, then the whole Congress thing kind of will evaporate on its own. And that's why they want to apply pressure that way. But no, I think for Pat, he was more or less ready to retire because he'd been in the sport However, he was more or less ready to retire when Liberty took over, and they asked him, please stay on and help us get these regulations right, or more right than they usually are when they get changed, which I think, we can give them a pass on that and say, I think they got closer to their intent than they normally do. So fair enough. He's ready to move on. Andretti are ready to give him a large wheelbarrow full of cash and reduced hours, because he's going to be, I think, a consultant and not like a full-time employee. So it's a win-win for everybody. There's a good technical team already in place. He's there to give advice, look things over. And mostly, I suspect he's there because he knows where the bodies are buried at FOM and will be able to apply pressure as needed.
Matt, since you're the expert on this, wouldn't you say the congressional letter is just politics, basically just vote hunting? They can't really do anything. I mean, they don't have a mandate to do anything seriously, do they?
They can and will do things if they decide that they want to for reasons of their own. Is it politics? Well, yes, of course. It's always politics when you're talking about government. But there is a history of them getting involved in other industries and legislating and legislating things happen, or referring things to the Department of Justice, which would investigate, or to the Federal Trade Commission, which might say, oh, that MotoGP thing, we don't think it's such a great idea after all. If you're going to do that, you got to sell this. Like Live Nation, for example. Don't forget, Liberty is a big, massive company, and they have lots of basically vertical monopolies, which is what allows them to be so successful.
But I mean, if you look at the facts of the case, they don't have a case. Just put it mildly.
Argue with Matt, right? So this is something we've been arguing about. Constantly we hear about the EU is getting involved in this. The EU is unhappy about this. And I feel like every now and then government or organizational representatives will have an opinion on what a sport is doing. But there's very few examples of them, well, especially of the EU, suddenly just turning around and going, right, you can't practice or you must change this. I would say we hear more noise from those kind of governments than we see actual change, Matt. I think that would be, I'm not saying they can't do anything, but my argument would be it's not the norm.
Yeah, because mostly they're going to be inclined to let people make money, but they are also concerned about the bigger picture. So for the EU, it's always a question of, you look at something and you say, there's a potential for them to get involved and do a thing. But you don't know if they will actually think it rises to the level of needing their intervention. It's a little bit different in the US. And the reason I find this to be different is that you have representatives from opposite sides, opposite political parties, signing the same letter. So that means that if it does go before a committee and there is fact finding, you have a much larger likelihood of some intervention taking place. Does that guarantee it will happen? Well, no, not at all, of course.
Being I wouldn't call it fan, but I would call it viewer of their committees. And even if they have bipartisan support for this, it completely differs from any case in the EU. EU definitely had a case back then. But if you look at Formula One, which was a more or less European enterprise 5 years ago, they now have their headquarters in Las Vegas. They have one of their biggest engine manufacturers coming in, Ford. And they are changing to be an American entity, basically. And then you want Congress to come and say, be more American now because we say so. It's just not going to fly if you ask me.
Okay, so if you just cast your mind back a little bit. Sorry, go on, Steve. And then I'll cast everyone's mind back.
I was just going to say that America historically have been pretty, heavy in, jumping in and stopping people from having, what do you call it? Just having complete control of one industry or one sport. Yeah. Didn't they? Monopoly, legislation. And didn't they do something with baseball a few years ago?
So I challenged Heather Wright, Heather and Peter Wright from Digital Law, who are probably going to join us in a week or so's time. But I I challenged. I said, name 7 times that the US has got involved with stuff, and they came back with Amazon, NFL, Verizon, tobacco, Facebook, Al Capone. I don't know what that is, but yeah, okay. So they have. I'm not saying they don't do it, but these things tend to fizzle out. Now, interestingly, though, the rejection from Liberty Media wasn't a flat out no. It was, oh, come and apply later. The no was for an immediate entry, right? So the no was for coming in next season. So they can still come in 27, 28, but they've got to come in with their own engine, is what Liberty Media argued. But conveniently, the price between what they would have paid if they'd got immediate entry and what they will now have to pay is somewhat different. So was that in the Concord agreement, Matt, the new dilution payment figures?
Yeah. So what happens is with the new Concord, the teams will have requested an increase in the original dilution fee, which I want to say was $200 million. And they're going to be looking for more like $750 million now, because they're going off what they think the teams are worth. Never mind, the teams are valued like tech stocks and aren't really worth that at all. Doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what is my share price tomorrow. And that's what they're going to base this decision on. That said, I still marvel. I still find 99% of their arguments to just, I just fully disagree with everything they say. I can't see how adding an extra team will cost them money. I just look at the next season of Drive to Survive as having huge viewership, and you go from there. But yeah, that's just me.
It does seem like if those reasons really added water, it might have been a firmer no. And so if it was no the last time around, and then it's yes this time around, and the only real difference is the amount of money they're going to have to pay, then that just sounds like a business decision, which I think we have to be grown up and go, everybody's looking at the money. Andretti's looking at, we could have made 200 million into a billion, but now we can only make 700 into a billion. That still makes sense for everyone. So like the whole thing is almost like a protracted negotiating position, really, and it's just played out in public.
Yeah.
But sorry, Matt.
No, go ahead. Kristian.
I was just gonna turn it back to Pat Symonds, basically, because hiring him is a valid card in this regard. There's been rumors, sayings about Andretti not answering emails, like basic things as getting back to the F1 group for a meeting and stuff like that. When you have Pat Symonds in your portfolio, he's going to understand the language from the get-go, which can only be a plus. But I had this thought today. If this Massa court thing is going to head for the courts, actually be a case, it would not look very good for F1 to have Pat Symonds on the payroll. So there could be some things there playing around, but it's just, of course, me guessing. Just
explain that. Why would it not look good to have Pat Symonds on the payroll?
Back in the days, Pat Symonds was leading Renault with Flavio Briatore when they had the crash gate in 2008, which, all the crash, the Alonso win, and the same year as Massa lost the championship in Brazil.
Oh, what a twisted web.
And did he get a 5-year ban?
He did.
After Crashgate?
Yeah, and Flavio was banned forever, I think.
He still is banned.
Manager. Yeah, he's still banned. But Pat Symonds is a different character than Flavio completely. He's from a technical background, and he's been working in F1 for the last couple of years, putting together all these overtaking plans and the pre-plans for the future designs and stuff like that. He's a very talented guy, very well respected in the paddock, and he knows what he's talking about. But could see this from the anything.
Sorry. The only thing you can say about Pat Symonds was that the last time he was involved with the team, he was the CTO of Williams, and they're still recovering from that.
Oh, shots fired.
Shots fired.
Lots of people tried to go into the Claire Williams era Williams to try and fix it. I don't think everybody who went there can be tainted, but it certainly did. Like, who else was it? Who went from Mercedes? Paddy Lowe went there, and that was in the midst of them not being able to get to testing for whatever reason, apparently not financial, but that's what it looked like. So I'm I'm going to defend him because I'm sure he's watching this from that particular charge. I guess it's an interesting hire because of how much involvement he's had in pushing forward with the regulations. It feels like it might really be a massive advantage. So the process for deciding what regulations you want to have obviously includes what aims do we want to have. So if we want to judge him by his overtake, if overtaking was the aim and better racing was the aim, I'm not quite sure we got there. But also part of the setting the new regulations is knowing the limits. So he probably has in mind exact limits, and they must kind of know where some vulnerabilities lie, and will know where, which ones are going to be, which areas are going to be enforced more or looked at more, or which ones they're hot on. So that could be a real advantage, because at the moment, I think Andretti coming in brand new, not based in the UK, I think they're doing it the hardest possible way they can. If they're genuinely going to be based in America, Andretti are going to need every single advantage they can get.
My understanding is they're going to do something similar to Haas, in that they're going to have an American base, but they've also already got property in their hiring staff in the UK at Silverstone too, where they're going to do a fair amount of their work. I think production work and maybe some design work. So it's going to be one of these multi-country setups like Haas has. And, the original plan was to buy a power unit from Renault, which they must be getting very cheap is all I can think. Until GM came online with their own version. So there was going to be a short term. And again, this is like one of these things that baffles me. That would have been a huge boon. Renault could use extra data, 2 extra cars of data. You get 2 extra seats on the grid for drivers to go into, which means more interest. A lot of their arguments from a business point of view don't necessarily make sense to me. I believe they can substantiate their numbers, but I don't think they can do so without a lot of confirmation bias. How about that?
So Andretti and Liberty don't seem to be like singing from the same song sheet. It's not a harmonious arrangement they're entering into. It looks quite confrontational. So here's this, a quote from Andretti. I believe Pat Symonds' expertise has been pivotal in shaping the narrative of Formula One, and his vote of confidence in joining our efforts speaks volumes. I'm really happy with his next step as our work continues at pace. So it's like they've bought credibility here, as well as any technical stuff. And the role is apparently a consulting role, which isn't necessarily an out-and-out salaried role. They could be getting this relatively cheap. So you come in, consult with us, fault check what we're doing, give us some little hints and tips about how to get around the regs, lend us your credibility, and pick up a consultancy fee whilst effectively retiring. It's win-win. This could be a very smart hire.
Yeah, it just makes it harder and harder for them to deny this entry without looking increasingly foolish based on who is involved.
I'd also consider the Formula One circus or the Paddock Club, the inside Paddock Club, as a very close society. Even though it appears to be open for everyone, it's a closed environment. Just like if you want to apply for funds in the medical industry or something like that, you have to know the language in your application. You have to know someone who knows someone, stuff like that. And that is very much how Formula One works. So Pat Symonds is definitely, he knows the language and he has the keys. Let's see if they let them in.
And let's move on then to Aston Martin, Matt. So I think this is our only real upgrade corner that I want to cover, because Mercedes are saying they're going to bring upgrades to every single race till Silverstone. So, I mean, that's fine, but, fool me once with a hopeful new upgrade. Shame on you. Fool me, what's this now? 17 times? Shame on me. So I'm ignoring those until we see any results. But what's going on with Aston Martin? They seemed to do this last season. They had upgrades that made them slower.
Well, I think they're officially couching it is that the upgrades have incidentally made the car harder to drive for the drivers. But I believe that their team principal is insistent that they're not going to roll off any of these updates to make the car easier to drive. They're going to work towards optimizing them to get them to do what they want to do. And this is, again, a similar pattern to sort of what we've seen from Mercedes, where they show up with updates that don't, I mean, I don't know, maybe they had correlations and knew the car would be harder to drive, but with enough data, they thought they could fix it. But again, I keep on going back to that Mercedes wind tunnel and thinking that there just may be something about it that makes certain aspects of this regulation set more difficult aerodynamically.
Yep. It sounds a bit like Mercedes-Benz to me. And I've got to ask, they're going through all of these changes, trying to find, better setups, and nothing is working for them. How long do you go through that process before you say, oh, my God, that upgrade set didn't work at all. We better go back to what we had and stop making the car harder to drive. I mean, Alonso, despite the fact I'm not a fan, is a pretty damn good driver. And if he's having difficulty, he's proven over the years that he can adapt to different cars and do it pretty well. If he's having difficulty, surely that means that, poor Lance is going to have at least as much difficulty, despite the fact that he scored 2 points last weekend. At some stage, you've got to be realistic and say...
Yeah. Did Stroll have those same upgrades?
I'm not sure he had the full thing. I think he had at least some of them.
Kristian?
At the Mercedes debrief, James Allison said they had found 1 to 2 tenths on the competition in Imola. And when asked about their Friday pace being so awesome and their Saturday and Sunday pace being somewhat of a meh, he was talking about the wind in Imola, and it was very windy on Friday. And wind is just not good for Formula One car, and especially when you go at these tight apexes at Imola, where everything is on a tight. I don't know the word for that.
Radius.
Anyway, you know what I mean. When the Mercedes is experiencing windy conditions, it's not affected as much as the rest of the competition. That says something, but they don't know what. So if they found 1-2 tenths at Imola and they are going to put on upgrades of the same character in the next 3-4 races, maybe we could see those 5 tenths eliminated within the next month or so. But I do want to add, it's a very fierce competition this year, and the field is so tight at a track like Imola. You have maybe 15, 14 cars within a second, and that is from now to now. And they are 10 different teams with 10 different cars with 1,000 people working. So, I mean, also to be a little bit realistic about what is achievable. I think the bar is just so high these days that if you are not on point with everything, you're gonna suffer. And a wind tunnel, like I've heard Matt talk about this wind tunnel. I think it's a very interesting topic. But shouldn't they know that by now? If that was the case, I would argue.
And I've got to say that they're already 35 points behind Mercedes. And if, the competition is going to be so difficult this year, they better get a move on, because they're running out of time in order to catch up. They've got to do something. They can't just sit on their hands and say, well, we'll wait and see what happens in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks' time. They've got to be addressing this. And if the upgrades they bought last week don't work, get rid of them and bring a new set.
Well, I mean, in the scope of a cost cap, that might be more difficult. I think.
Sure, I appreciate that.
I mean, well, Mercedes can bring updates to every weekend apparently, so cost can't be damned. But Aston Martin, they're disappointing a lot of people because they've got Alonso, they've got the Alonso fan base, they've got the Stroll fan as well, and they had built up everybody's expectations last year by starting off so spectacularly, and to their credit, hanging on way longer than I thought they would. So my early season prediction of that won't last, it did have me sweating when we got to like race 4 and 5 and they're still getting podiums. I was like, oh dear, no, have faith. Double down on your initial prediction. It'll all come good. But this season, they didn't even get that initial jump. and then they're not developing well as well. So, what does this mean for Aston Martin's ambitions? Apparently, Lawrence Stroll was saying he was losing patience with the lack of progress. So what's happening? What's going wrong? Firstly, why didn't they turn up with a great car that was the second fastest again? They managed it last season. Why not this season? And why can they not upgrade, Matt? Like, have the wheels fallen off the wagon? Where's the recovery?
I don't think the wheels have fallen entirely off the wagon, or else they'd be back down the grid with the Williams and the Sauber and so forth. So I don't see them making a concerted charge at Mercedes at this point. I think Mercedes have a baked-in advantage, both on the driver front and on the general understanding. Like, I think they just have a slightly faster car, and it's just they're going to spread that margin as they've adopted a much more sensible policy of there is no magic bullet, but if we make the car a little bit faster every round or every other round, then we will actually keep up with the competition and maybe make some inroads. Where it all went wrong for them was the updated technical directive number 39 last season. And as I heard it, and I'm going to say, this is one of these things that I've heard, I think I read it, but it's been a year, people, and this is what you get. Just like Kristian saying, you know what I mean. When you get all the old people on, you lose out a lot of nouns. And so here I am, and I'm telling you, I remember seeing that I think, in particular, Aston got a letter from the FIA basically saying, you should probably bring your updates ahead of when this technical directive falls so that it's not so obvious how much time you're going to lose by fixing this. Now,
that's interesting.
Like I said, that's something I heard. I remember hearing. I don't remember where I heard it. So if you can't find it in the motorsport press, you can blame it all on me just making stuff up out of my old brain.
Okay, this is interesting, though. Why do F1 or the FIA give the team that kind of warning? Or why are these things done in secret? So in 2018, there was allegedly a team that was using too high a flow rate, and there was a technical directive issued, just like here in 2023, and then one team's performance just dropped off a cliff.
Tanked.
And the straight line speed absolutely tanked. And the defenders of that team would say things like, no, they haven't lost engine power. They're choosing to run a much higher downforce, which leads to a lower lap time. So, but you couldn't say it out loud. You would be your lawyers would be getting nervous if you said, Team X was on plan F because of this technical directive. And I'm much more comfortable saying it now that Ferrari were nerfed by that technical directive and had to pay a fine in as far as what I can tell. So why be secret about it? Why not flag it up and go, we found one of the teams they tried something, fair play. We found them to be outside the technical directive. Therefore, they've had to take corrective action. And that's why their performance has dropped off. What's wrong with that, Steve?
Well, I think that probably the FIA and Liberty don't want it to be seen that their teams are cheating or trying to cheat, even though F1's been full of cheats since the very first, race was ever run. I can't see any other reason why they would be not being transparent about it. As far as I'm concerned, they should be being transparent and stand up and say, well, we caught this team circumventing the rules.
Yeah.
Isn't that good because we're doing the right thing for the sport? And
it's not like you're saying, oh, you murdered some people just walking down the street. It's we have a sport where you're supposed to try stuff and you're supposed to push the limit. And as Steve Laletta told us last week, and you'll hear more from on the NASCAR special,
name drop,
literally said, it's a team boss, he said, well, if you're not cheating, you're not winning. And you go, all right. I said, all the teams are setting out there to push the envelope of the technical regulations. I don't think it's, you should get dragged out naked by the shame nun if you end up crossing that line. I think you just kind of go, we got done. Sorry, Kristian.
If you have a nature of cheating being part of winning, and it's a necessity to cheat basically to win, you also have to have a system where you don't point fingers and say cheat.
Yeah, exactly. Agree, yeah.
Basically ruins the system. So when Ferrari does something on their engine, or McLaren, Mercedes did this with their hydraulics at some point, at the suspension. Everyone knows about it. Everyone talks about it. All the engineers talk about it. No one's getting quoted because it's unquotable, of course. So it's not like it's a secret for very long. But you can't really do anything about it legally. You can't really do anything about it in an official document. So you just have to work your way around it. And that is maybe rewriting something to combat it without ever really talking about it.
But isn't it better for Liberty to at least be upfront and say, you know, we're the organisation that runs this sport. We found these guys pushing the limit. You don't have to say cheat. We found these guys bending the rules, and we've come down on them and told them to pull their head in. Isn't that better for Liberty? They are then seen as strong regulators and running a, you know, as clean a sport as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
If they go behind the scene and put out these secret directives and whatever else, no one knows what's going on. Everyone is then left to make up all sorts of rumours and conjecture.
Yes, Matt.
So what I need to clarify here, in as few words as possible, is that...
Why start now?
Okay, fine. I'll use lots of them then. I was going to do it in like 10 seconds, but congratulations. No, technical directives are not actual regulations. They are an interpretation by either the stewards or the technical committee of the rules. So for 39D, that addressed flexible bodywork. And the understanding was that teams were using an excess amount of flexible bodywork, particularly the floor, but also the front wing, to achieve these gains. So when you update that technical directive, it's not a question of a team violating a regulation that exists and is in the technical or sporting regulations. It's a question of, we have updated our interpretation and we now find that you may fall foul of our new interpretation. Teams are generally given time to address it. And if they think it's going to be a real problem, they don't want the sport to look bad. So they tell the team, yeah, definitely you, and you should definitely get to work on that before the deadline, please.
I'm just massively distracted because the chat room is demanding that F1 now has a shame none. There could be worse systems. The Game of Thrones shame none. Well, I think we should at least consider it for the 2026 regs, Kristian.
I agree with Steve, but I think it's if you look at Liberty, they've definitely opened up. We get to see technical directives, some of them. We get to see what's changed on the car at every race now. But I think if you hammer down on it, while I do understand the effect of it, if you hammer down on a system that is based upon creativity and constantly finding the limits and go above them, I think you ruin some of that if you every time someone goes just an inch too far, you hammer down on them.
Shame none.
Yeah, that's what I feel about it.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think that this in itself is an interesting chat because it's no one wants to say the quiet bit out loud, which is that all the teams are massively trying it on all the time. So somebody said, oh, they hate the cheat to win philosophy, but every single team is looking for that loophole. Every single team will have something on their car that is outside the technical regulations, waiting for it to get caught and highlighted. Like a lot of the teams will probably have been wearing their plank down because it tends not to get picked up on. That no car on the podium had their plank inspected for, I think, the whole of this era of regulations until Lewis Hamilton got on the podium, and then suddenly all the podiums. It's a complete coincidence, but you can run your plank lower or run your plank wear in the kind of vague risk of like, it probably isn't going to get caught, Matt. So I think every single team has something like that. Oh my goodness. Well, we had the Lotus team principal saying that they had a part on their front wing that was designed to deliberately brake and drop down, be outside the technical regulations, but provide more downforce. And if they were ever caught, they were going to go, oh no, I can't believe that stanchion broke. Ugh. We'll really keep an eye on that. Yeah. Oh, slap on the wrist. Oh, my poor little wrist. Okay. But I bet you there's so much of that going on.
There always is. It is racing. And just to bring it home with the Aston and what the issue is now. One issue, as I mentioned, might be just a difficulty of correlation between what the wind tunnel shows them and what they get on track. But I think also part of the thing that a lot of people miss is that if I expect my floor to have a certain behavior or my front wing to have a certain behavior, and that gets taken away, well, that affects everything else on that car. And if I've designed my whole philosophy around that part doing that, and it no longer does that, well, then that can be a long road back. I don't recall Aston introducing sort of what we would call a revolutionary upgrade, like Red Bull did this year with a new chassis and a new change in side pod philosophy and stuff like that. They might still simply be dealing with the effects of, we designed a whole car around a part that we can no longer use, and we're still trying just to fix that.
EJ in our chat says, so K-Mag's end plate, ... No, that doesn't count as movable aero. What if the Haas actually runs better without the front wing end plates, but you have to have them? So he gets told every race, you go out there and you get those front wing end plates knocked off and go, that'll get somehow another 10 points of aero. Yeah, maybe. And by the way, you can join our Patreon Slack group by supporting us on Patreon. Thank you so much to all the new and all the old patrons as well. We've had a massive increase in our Patreon. Somehow, I don't know why, but we're absolutely delighted because people do drop off and dip out of the Patreon. So we do rely on fresh people coming in and supporting us for a little while as well. So patreon.com/missedapex. If you want to chuck in a $5 a month, you will get access to our Slack Patreon forum, an ad-free feed on the audio feed, and what else? Some extra but worse content for our patron pods that we try and do on a Friday before a Grand Prix. Okay, we are going to move on to special liveries in Monaco. But firstly, Steve, I want you to plug a thing, promote a thing. Your wife is doing a thing. What is she doing, and how can we support it?
Okay, it's called Darkness to Daylight, and it's a charitable event, and it is trying to draw attention to and prevent domestic and family violence. It's a really good charitable cause. The event itself is a 110-kilometre run, which starts at just after dark.
Wait, how many kilometre? What?
110-kilometre run that starts after dark. I mean, there are three stages. There are three kind of levels to this. It starts just after dark, and you run through the night, and it finishes about 7 o'clock in the morning. And that 110-kilometre stage is open to individuals and teams, and I'm reliably told that there are some bunch of loony individuals who sign up and run the full 110 kilometres. But there are teams that are put together by various businesses.
Right, so Jane isn't running the 110 kilometres.
No. She's not running the 110. Well, mate, she's, not quite as old as I am, but anyway, so the people that get involved get sponsored, get sponsorship for this, and it's raising money to be able to, get awareness and help people who find themselves victims of domestic and family violence. And she would like to get some more sponsorship. So in the show notes below and in our Slack group, I'll stick a link where you could go and
go and check it out at least.
Yeah, put a couple of dollars in and help. It'll be really good. It's a great cause, and we should support it. And thank you for letting me do that.
Absolutely. Is there a level of participation that involves just sitting in a single pub and drinking the whole time, though?
Yeah, it's called watching, and that's what I do.
No, fair enough. No, thanks, Steve. Thank you for highlighting that. And we have a link, like I said, in the show notes. I've put it in Slack and the YouTube. Now it's Darkness to Daylight, and it says in Australia, on average, 110 people die from domestic and family violence every year. Those participating are running 110 kilometres, where each kilometre represents one of those lives lost. So I would appreciate you going in and checking that out, and good luck to Jane. I'd rather her than us, if that's fair. So
thank you.
Obviously, yes. Let's go on to something lighter, which is a much lighter livery for the McLaren. So the McLaren are running a pretty cool livery, which is a tribute to Senna. Now, there's been a lot of Senna tributes led by Sebastian Vettel in Imola. So I'm not going to slate this decision at all. I'm just going to talk about it because it's a cool looking livery. But my first thought, and maybe this is just because I'm getting old, I guess, was that it's Schumacher's Benetton. That immediately, as soon as I saw that livery, I went, oh no, it's the 90s Benetton. But also, wouldn't Imola have been the place to do the Senna tribute? Or have we just got to a point where Monaco is now the special livery circuit? Which I don't think I'd object to that, Steve. Why not have all the teams run a historic livery at Monaco?
Well, I'd have no problem with that at all. I'd love to see some of the cars painted in some of the great historic liveries. I mean, my one comment about this whole thing is that it seems a bit weird. I mean, Alex has said this in our WhatsApp group, and I agree with him. It's a bit weird that we've just had Imola, which, you know, has a historic reference, and why didn't we do it at Imola? Why is it a week later now?
Well, the explanation I have seen is essentially that Monaco was like the stomping grounds of Senna. He had some of his most special drives there. So I think that's why it was chosen. It's also, as Imola was, sort of a historic circuit for Formula One. But to me, that's makes the suggestion of let's do throwback liveries at Monaco the genius of it, because it's been around, and you know, most of the teams on the grid have a lineage they can attach themselves to, so they can go back through their history and certainly do a better job than Ferrari did with their little livery change.
Kristian, so poor Ferrari, but yeah, that didn't land, would be the fair thing to say.
I agree with Spanners. I love that livery, and I love their suits and their special helmets for Monaco. It's it's awesome.
They've nailed it. They've nailed it from a design point of view.
Definitely did. And they're going to nail it even more when they go back to their chrome livery afterwards. They should do that.
I mean, we could get into a whole chat on our favourite liveries, and we should do that. But yeah, the chrome, you're talking about the early Hamilton chrome.
Yeah, that
McLaren.
chrome. Yeah, basically a mirror. That was just such a good-looking car. It was just so mean. Yeah,
you couldn't spare the weight for the paint these days. But I wondered why it wouldn't be the colours that Senna drove in the McLaren, which was the red and white, the Marlboro. And so they did provide an explanation for that. I will say people get instantly upset when you mention Marlboro or Rothmans or, you know, the John Player special liveries because of its association with tobacco. I completely get that. I've lost loved ones to tobacco. I think the fact that they knew that it was killing people whilst they were actively pushing it is abhorrent. How addictive it is just evil. And so I get all that. But also, that was the colours of my favourite race cars. So I don't think they're going to sell any more Rothmans on the strength of, you know, using that livery. Obviously, you're not going to put the tobacco company on there. But you give me a blue and yellow Williams on the grid against a red and white McLaren, and then somebody rocking the John Player special Lotus black and gold. I think we're far enough kind of past that point. You know, nobody now under the age of 15 in the UK is ever going to be able to legally buy cigarettes. So
do we go as far as having the split BAR livery?
The British American Tobacco. So did they have part Lucky Strike and part...
Half the car was Lucky Strike and the other half was whatever it was.
Yeah, well, yeah. And these are all just classic liveries, and it's almost a shame to let the tobacco industry then rob us of ever being able to look back and have that kind of tribute to the old cars. Oh, but the explanation from McLaren was that many drivers drove that red and white car. So that's why it didn't feel specific to Senna. That's why they wanted to honour Senna's Brazilian colours of gold and green. Gold and green, also Australian colours. So they wanted to honour specifically, you know, the personal colours of Ayrton Senna, which is lovely. Matt.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting thing because we've had, I don't want to say an excess of Senna tribute, but I will say that people I know who are genuine fans of Senna at the time have noted that there's been an awful lot of that, and there maybe doesn't need to be a whole lot more. But then it occurs to me, this is actually a 0 year, I think, since the events in Imola. Yeah. And that's why we're getting all the extra hoop-de-doo and whatnot from the team. So fair enough. But I would love to see them extend this as you said, into a full-on, if Monaco is going to be a train, let's make it a pretty train.
And so they could have a livery, for example. It wouldn't have to be particularly the old team colours. They could have, say, a livery that is just Damon Hill and his father's helmet livery, Graham Hill, the black with the little white rectangles all around it. You can have all sorts of tributes to those kind of classic, those classic themes. So yeah, why not isolate it to Monaco? And then there'll be something to watch on the Sunday.
I can add to the Monaco debate that it's probably going to rain during qualifying.
I saw that 40% chance.
Yeah, 25% chances of thunderstorms, so we're not even going to see the cars.
The problem is we don't race in Monaco when it's raining. So as much as you think you might want some rain, they just don't go around. I think the last time I saw a proper wet race in Monaco was one of the Hamilton-Nico Rosberg years. Have they had a proper wet race there? I know there was some rain a few years ago, but they red flagged it and delayed it to the point that that most of the water was gone. So it's a careful what you wish for. I think a level of rain where they would go at Silverstone is enough to delay the race in Monaco.
But it's
they don't like raining in Monaco at all.
But on Saturdays it's qualifying, and you have to do the qualifying, and you don't get the spray from the other cars during qualifying. So it could spice out things a little bit.
Much.
Well, I mean, there was 2 years ago, no? We had rain during the race. There was swapping to different tires. And yeah, I mean, in a deluge, they're not going to run, but they're not going to run anywhere because of the issue with the spray from the diffuser.
So what happened a couple of years ago, the race you're referring to, Matt, is that, hang on, sorry, I just, somebody's raised their hand, I think it's me, and has just completely balked our... I think it's me. How do you put the hand down in Zoom? Oh my God. So look, I'll edit out the audio version, but on the video, people can just laugh at me struggling to do this. There's a button that says lower hand. Okay, Matt, we've got you back. The race we were talking about there, it got delayed because the rain was coming down. It made the beginning of the race sort of interesting as the track dried, and then it was dull as dishwater for the back 2/3. So it really didn't add an awful lot to the race at all, having the rain.
Well, all right, maybe I'm recalling a different race, but there was the Alonso double pit for the wrong tires and almost getting caught by the Alpine of Ocon. I thought that was actually kind of an interesting race because the crossover point was genuinely hard to judge, and some people did put on the wrong sets of tires.
Okay. I'm not going to take away your hope. Is that I'm not going to
I just with rain and qualifying, assuming they can run it, you can get some cars in positions where they absolutely shouldn't be, like Tsunoda in third place, for example. And then on a dry Sunday, he should well be capable, assuming they figure out how to start their cars, of defending that the whole time. So you could get some really unusual results with unexpected climactic conditions.
Was it last year? Was it last year that is the one I'm describing? Or was it last year that it rained? Okay.
I mean, that's assuming that we get racing if it rains there at all. As Scott Rainsford points out in the Slack chat, when it rained there last time, it washed out and shorted the start lights.
Oh yes,
if you remember, and we had to wait and stop.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, let's move on then. Where do we want to go next? I think the Alpine thing is interesting, and then we've got a few mailbag questions as well. I'm surprised that Alpine are being quite relaxed about their driver lineup because they've got a decent driver lineup. So I think there's a lot of teams on the grid that would have Gasly, and if he wasn't available, then maybe Ocon. But these are two decent drivers with long careers in Formula One already, bags of experience. So I just think the Alpine don't have a car to keep them, and yet they're being really relaxed about it. And it was, is it Mecchi? No, who's the Bruno?
Bruno Femi.
Bruno Femi. He was on the pit wall on the Sky broadcast at the weekend. But he's saying, well, we've got academy drivers, we'll be okay. I just think he's being much too relaxed about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of, I don't keep a huge close eye on the academy drivers, but I'm not aware of them having any, really good up and coming drivers. maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that they're being very sort of,
laissez-faire. They're being
laissez-faire. That's a good way. Yeah, about their drivers, I'd be trying to hang on to them, if you know what I mean.
I did it in French.
Not that I'm a great fan of either of them, but nonetheless, they have some experience between them.
You have a French team with a French engine, 2 French drivers, right? I mean, it's just the perfect match. And after 1 year, both drivers want to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, something's not really cooking at.
This is also kind of perfect, though, in a way.
Yeah. I totally. I mean, I understand why they want to move, but I totally agree with the chillness around this. It's just it's mind-boggling. Basically, I'm not sure what they're going to do with the entirety of for Alpine and their engine department, because
if they're typically French, they'll burn it down before they leave.
Oh, right. No, I think that counts as that. No, there's no typically.
Did we do a racism?
There's no typically French setting fire to
it's
things.
unionism.
Characteristic. Bonjour to all our French listeners. Can I just say how good the service station food is at a French petrol station? So good.
Perfect. Just, I mean, go there. But don't talk to them. Oh, no, sorry, just go there. Eat their food.
Hey, Uncle Steve, we've got an edit on the video. If you just want to note that down, 50 minutes in, we did a racism. If we could just whip that out, that'd be cool. And no one in the live stream tell on us. But there was even some suggestion that Mick Schumacher is in the running. And to me, that is not a works team ambition kind of lineup to be talking about, Kristian.
He's driving for the WEC car right now.
Yeah.
So he's in the team. He's wearing the suit already. And I mean, he's a Formula One name. I mean, it would look good, wouldn't it?
I think the name that's getting missed here would be Jack Doohan, who is a good driver and has acquitted himself. But the issue you have here is that reportedly Ocon is the number 1 choice at Haas right now, even over Behrman, because Gene is still somewhat rookie shy.
Matt's getting arrested in the background. Oh my God, that's right outside your apartment and constant.
Yeah, this is what I was having you vamp for earlier, was the inevitable emergency vehicle sirens outside my window this time of day.
That's the Brooklyn anthem.
Yeah, it is a thing that happens. So enjoy the ambiance.
All right. We're used to it. Go on, carry on.
So you've got Jack Doohan, who would be a reasonable nod to replace one of the drivers. You've got Ocon leading at Haas, according to some people, as their number 1 choice. And also, if Sainz chooses not Audi, he's also been mentioned as being a real favorite of theirs too. And you have Gasly mentioned there, and I think also maybe at Williams. So you've got 2 very experienced drivers with wins and podiums leaving the team, and you're going to replace them with a rookie and someone who's not even in Formula One right now. This is not the way to run a works team and make it better, which makes me wonder, like, in other American sports, sometimes if you're close to the bottom and you get some extra good stuff if you finish dead last, like you get the first draft pick, for example. Occasionally teams will be accused of purposefully tanking the end of their season. And it really feels like, if this is what they're up to, it really feels like they're just tanking everything. They've ditched their entire technical staff.
Yeah.
They're getting rid of all of their good drivers. And you have the guy who was in charge of the engine that is now terrible currently in charge of the team. So I there must be some sort of corporate 4D chess going on that I cannot see, but it has nothing to do with the performance of their actual F1 outfit, as far as I can tell.
Can we just remind people that when Jessica Smetana from Le Bartard show was on here about 3 months ago, she called the Alpine tanking. And she was like, oh, is that what they're doing for wind tunnel time or whatever, or lack of expectations or shorting the stock? Something funny is going on at Alpine.
If you listen, I mean, if you're completely quiet and listen in the background, very, very distant, you can hear Otmar giggle.
Well, unless Alpine are executing their plan perfectly, and we just don't know what it is.
I did have this wonder if maybe this is just a way to lower their expectation to just the bottom level, so that anything they show up with afterwards will look better. It's the only thing I can think of, because they potentially should have been competing with Aston for 5th or 6th place, but they've just thrown it all out the window for, reasons I cannot fathom.
All right, then why don't we move on to some listener feedback? So we love hearing from you guys. We have had a lot of listener feedback. We do read it all, so love hearing from you. Can't always respond, or sometimes if you get a really long email and I feel like, oh my goodness, I can't justify it with my reply. My response is not going to match that. So I would say if you could keep it to a paragraph, I'll do my best to get back to them. And we're trying to read more and more of them on the show as well. But feedback at missedapex.net, or you can do spanners at missedapex.net or matt at missedapex.net. So we've got one here from, I can't say the name, but long-time listener, first-time emailer, goes on to mention the fact that we develop crew. And, a lot of the crew start off in one certain place mentally, might have struggled, but are given the room to grow. And I think that's something we've done really well here at Missed Apex Podcast. We also have a lot of side projects going on at the moment. So Formula E, MotoGP, check those out and you'll hear some of the Derricks from Missed Apex Podcast having a bit more room to breathe and doing cool stuff. So Kyle, who is a named character, has been hosting MotoGP all season long and has done a great job. And we had Jules Seegers jump in and be a substitute host there as well. And Christina and Chris Stevens are doing wonders over at the Formula E podcast too. So thank you for that. But this is about the synthetic fuels thing. Now, I've been getting a little bit of heat for suggesting that is, not a long-term solution to the road network. And I sort of stand by that, but I will say I've been getting mixed up and confused between biofuels from crops and just biofuels that you can create, or synthetic fuels that you can create apparently from magic, which I still don't think are a solution to the road network, but I'm happy for that distinction to be made. This emailer says synthetic fuels are less road relevant for normal cars, but it's absolutely going to be road relevant for Ferrari, McLaren, Alpine, even Audi to an extent. A big challenge will be that they need more fuel to complete a race distance without the hybrid. So do they need to bring back refueling to make these fuel tanks even bigger, or make the fuel tanks even bigger? So these synthetic fuels may have a place, Matt. If we're not talking about road relevance, then that's fine. All bets are off and we can use anything. We can use hamsters and I don't care. But I just wanted to make that distinction that I understand there's a difference between plant-grown synthetic fuels and some of these newer, more theoretical synthetic fuels, which really have never been tested or scaled up, but I understand they exist.
Well, they actually were in World War II by the Germans, but you probably don't want to get fully into that. There's the Fischer-Tropsch process, which I think is the Paddy Lowe zero petroleum firms usage. There is WEC, where they take the leftovers from winemaking and turn that into fuel. I've seen fuel processes where they take algae that's grown in tanks and use that as a biological precursor to get their carbons. None of it seems like it's scalable unless you're talking about maybe using just general agricultural leftovers that don't feed animals. There is a level of, we have organic material that could be recycled into fuels. But the use cases I've always seen, and I've mentioned this before, would be things like airplane travel, where you really amount of. So there's relevance to the petroleum manufacturers that are partners with the team, but not necessarily in manufacturing fuel that will be used as a drop-in replacement in cars. Because again, as you point out rightly, it's hard to see how that scales given the energy demands necessary to make those fuels.
So the total... sorry, Steve.
Sorry.
Go on, Steve.
No, you
Steve.
Okay.
Steve.
Is it not true that you can produce carbon that can be turned into synthetic fuels from just processing garbage? I think there are at least 3 or 4 different processes that you can use. Sure, they're not terribly cost effective at the moment, but then either was producing petrol when we first started to do that. It's a matter of development and scaling and all of those things. And I've got to say that given that we have a problem on this planet with, disposing of garbage of all sorts, why aren't we pursuing that slightly more?
Yeah, I think like there's so many different paths you could go to that aren't mature that that's why EV and renewables is kind of sort of taking a lead at the moment because they're so sort of far down the road. And we've got a comment there from Wes saying Alpine are already... No, I'm not reading that out. Matt, why would you put that in the chat? I can't read that out. Alpine are already using 100% horse waste for their fuel. That is what you call a hospital pass in broadcasting.
Because it was genuinely hilarious, and I just put it there for your private amusement.
Kristian.
So total from car fuel, Formula One cars is less than 1% of the total carbon footprint of the Formula One circus.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit. Is the manufacturers gonna adapt to whatever the Formula One cars are driving right now? I'm not so sure about that. And if we look at the future cars of Formula One, the MGU-H is going to disappear. It's only going to be the K, but the electric motor is going to be around 350 kilowatts. And there are already rumors about the ICE, the internal combustion engine, basically just being there to load the battery. So
like a generator, like a moving generator.
Yeah, well, actually, that is what I've heard it called, the generator of the battery in the Formula One car. Of course, it was a bit jokingly said, but that is the way we are going. That is the direction. So, I mean...
Why don't we just call it Formula E then?
Because there's an ICE.
Well, it's a generator.
Battery, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, there gets a point where it's much more about what they're projecting. And if they want to set an example and they want to say, okay, well, we're projecting this because we think it'll be good for the planet if everybody copied this or followed this example, or at least saw that this high octane petrol head raw motorsport thing is environmentally conscious. So I'm not oblivious to just everybody generally setting good examples or exploring new technologies, as long as you don't try and tell me that it's for road relevance. I just don't lie to me too much. Lie to me believably.
And this is why we've talked about this too long, because I've already come up with a counter idea, which is as EV adoption increases and the number of cars using actual petroleum drops, there may be a crossover where there is, for a short period of time, some relevance to having this kind of fuel. But it's not going to be relevant in the way that it's being sold to us, which is, oh, next year, everyone will have this fuel and you won't be creating carbon anymore. So drive your cars to your heart's content, people. That's never going to happen.
I just found out what caused my video issue earlier, because I'm not going to actually edit any of that out. But if I put my hand up in real life, it does it in Zoom, which locks me out of some of my features that I use from Zoom into OBS. So that's something for everybody to look out for. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Wow.
So the 2026 regulations have triggered me slightly by looking at louder noise as being one of the aims. So they've gone all through, like, we're going to be efficient. We're going to use less fuel in total. It's down to 70 kilograms of fuel, I think, for the 2026 regulations. So they're talking about all this efficiency, all of these great, wonderful optic things for being, efficient and mindful. And then they go, and it might make more noise as well. Well, that's waste energy. If you made it so it didn't make noise, you'd have to use less power. But the noise thing, again, is optics, because some people wrongly complain and want Formula One to be screaming louder. No, because if it's any louder, you just have to put ear defenders on anyway, and that makes it less loud. Stop it. It doesn't need to go.
It does need to go. I'm just going to add one thing. If you really want to make a difference, because the real problem is not what we're going to drive, what we're going to put fuel in our engines in 5 years. The real problem is we have billions and billions of cars already existing. And if suddenly we only want to drive EVs with batteries, what are we going to do with all these cars? We're just going to throw them, just going to trash them.
Demolition derby. The answer is right there.
What are we going to do with all the batteries that are currently being produced, which are going to be obsolete in 5 years? No one's going to use them in 5 years. There's going to be so many Teslas everywhere that there's no reason to repair them because it's way too expensive. So the real issue is basically all the cars, all the trash that is going to be parked in parking lots. How are we going to drive the old cars? If we could invent something, if we could just go back to the V10 or the V12 basically, and invent the fuel for those so they would be environmentally friendly, we would have solved the noise problem. We would have solved the problems of all the old cars. Fixed. And thank you for listening to Mr. Apex.
And that was Kristian's TED Talk. We've got another listener question, which on the face of it, I went, that's a bit of a silly question. Then I went, I don't exactly know the answer. So Michael Abon says, what's that person checking for? Or rather, what would cause the person to not wave the green flag? I've been watching since 2007, but I can't recall that flag ever not being waved after the formation lap. Yeah, there's some Derek walks across the back of the grid after the formation lap and waves the green flag. I want to know how much authority he has, or I want to know how he gets picked. I want to know if there's ever been a woman, because I keep defaulting to he, and I can feel my daughter telling me off from the background. So what responsibility do they have? What would cause them to not wave the green flag? And is race control really paying attention to the guy, or is it like the elevator button that you press it and it doesn't really do anything? It's a placebo, Matt. No, it's a giant placebo. Steve?
No, I think I've seen a situation where the guy didn't wave the green flag, and the reason was that there was a stalled car on the grid. And that's what he's looking for. He's looking to check that those cars are in their correct boxes and that they're all ready to run.
And this is why you have to listen to the old guys.
Yeah, and this is why I got the uncles on.
And this is 110% it. We've seen cars have to go around and do a second formation lap. We've seen cars unable to get off the grid, and literally that's the procedure. If you're sitting 13th and your car stalls, stops working, has a problem, as a driver, you put your hand straight up, and that green flag person waves a not green flag so that they don't start, and the 20th person drive smack into the back of you at full speed, because that is one of the worst accidents you can have on a starting grid, is if a car can't actually leave. You see it more in Formula 2, where they like to stall the car after the start, but it is literally just there to protect the drivers and make sure all the cars are ready to go.
They put their hand up, and then their Zoom call freezes because it thinks it's putting a hand up. And
exactly.
There's even a little timer. I put my hand up, and there's a little circle, and I've got that amount of time to quickly put my hand down, or it gets acknowledged as a hands up. But if he's only been watching since 2007, Kristian, stop trying to make it happen from your end. It's a host thing. And even if you could do it, why would you? This is why you and Van Gien and Antonia aren't allowed to be on the same show altogether, because I can't handle all three of you, more than one of you at a time. But if you've only been watching since 2007, the reliability since then is so much better that there's been a less of an issue with that. And he has oh my God, Kristian, right? He has managed to do a thumbs up, which has taken a screenshot, and he's now frozen in place with a thumbs up. I'm close to giving up, Matt, but is there time for one more question?
Sure, why not? Which one you want to do?
Well, this is a big one. I don't know if I can take that one on about the Max Verstappen one. No, we'll do Austin. Here we go. Austin asks, how many races do you think is a good amount to gauge if a driver can stick it on the grid? Not necessarily being a title contender, but good enough to be a career driver. I think that's an excellent question. It's one that me and Matt disagree on fully. And Kristian, let's see if we can hear you, even though the video can just see a frozen screenshot of you with a thumbs up.
I mean, before this podcast today, I thought it was somewhat technically above average, but everything is... Yeah, I'm sorry.
And how long should a driver be given to gauge if they can stick it on the grid?
I'm sorry, I haven't listened. I'm trying to fix my picture.
Chaos.
Steve, how long do you think a driver should get?
Well, I think they should get at least a season. You know, Formula One, stepping into a Formula One car is, you know, a big step up from Formula 2 and the other series. I think in order to get settled in and all the bugs worked out. But I think a season is okay. Some people say 2 seasons, but that's really, pushing it a bit, I reckon. If you're good, we'll probably see, that you are good in the first dozen races or so, but everyone deserves a few more just to see how they hone their skills.
Do you think this has been ruined by people like Hamilton jumping in and having those kind of seasons where, they could have, they won in their, 6th race? Hamilton did and could have won a championship. Does that skew our expectations?
Well, they're special people, yes. They come along once in a blue moon. Max is the same, I suppose. But, the average driver that gets into Formula One needs more than 6 races in order to prove himself, that's for sure.
So I'm just going to go right away. If you mention Hamilton coming in and looking great, I'm going to point out that drivers back then got 15,000 kilometers of out of competition testing that they do not get now. If drivers had that much testing, I'd be happy to chuck them out much sooner. Based on what I've heard from Franz Tost and from what I've observed myself, and I will point out now, I think if you want to adequately judge a rookie, if that is your priority and not just having the fastest drivers, I understand that those two things can be at cross purposes. But if you want to adequately judge a rookie, you really need to give them 3 seasons. Because even now, I'll point out Piastri right now
3 seasons
is fast as Lando on tracks that have low wear and low degradation, but nowhere near him still in terms of his ability to master tire management. He had as much preparation as anyone I've seen walking into the sport. He is clearly an incredibly talented driver. He's been at it for a season and a half now, and he's still not all the way there. He's not fully formed as a driver.
All right. So what you're saying is, in the time we've seen Piastri there, although he's not challenging Norris, we have seen enough to know that he's probably going to have a good career as an F1 driver. So that's fine. But we could see that in the first season. I don't think you need to go, if you've got a driver who's binning it, okay, sorry, America. But when you've got Logan Sargent, who's not fast and also binning it, we don't then need 3 seasons to stick that out and find out.
I stand by the fact that a team principal agrees with me and you don't.
Which team principal?
Franz Tost, who ran Toro Rosso, that became Red Bull.
Sorry.
That ran that team forever.
Oh, Toro Rosso.
Absolutely said that.
The team that has a reputation for literally just dragging rookies out and just binning them, Alguersuari, Buemi. The team that wanted to put their rookie drivers in COVID camps and just to see which ones lived. And go, I'm
pretty sure that was Marco.
That was Marco.
Okay. Yeah. Nice try there.
If any of these survive, we might put them in the Red Bull. But no, Toro Rosso were brutal. Absolutely brutal. How long did Albon get at Red Bull? There you go.
Less than a season, I think.
Yeah, and that's my point.
Yeah.
And possibly the most difficult to drive car that was 2 or 3 iterations behind Max, and that's a fair comparison, sure.
Okay. What I'll say is, I think you can tell with some drivers I think you can tell that you should have binned off Mazepin.
Vibes.
No, Mazepin, that was fairly obvious. That ain't happening. Schumacher,
fair.
Less obvious, but you're going to go, it's not happening. He's not stringing it together. What did for De Vries, it was sticking it in the wall. It's the mistakes. So let's say the ultimate race pace isn't there, but you're doing the job well and you're having good feedback and, you're stringing weekends together. And that's what Piastri is doing. He's not doing anything daft. Then, you can give it the time to nurture and grow. But there's some drivers you look at and you go, no, fair enough. I think it's fair to bin a driver after 7-8 months if they have been putting it in the wall and they're slow. Kristian, then Matt.
I want to apologize to Aston for not listening to the question when it was initially posted. So here comes
you're back with us now, are you? Okay. Nice of you to join us.
This is going to be a senior approach. So this is going to be way too balanced to put in those boxes. The question basically wants us to put it. These times it's either black or white, it's red or blue, it's left or right. And we all need these limits to, well, if he did this, we have to disqualify him. And I think the answer to this question lies in all the details, and there are so many details in Formula One. So you have to have so much knowledge, so much insight, so much. You need to follow the sport constantly. You have to check all the lap times. You have to see his consistency, how he does with tires, and yada, 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 to be able to answer this question properly. Also, everything all you guys said, I agree with.
I will just say to Matt, though, I'm not saying that unless you look like a top-line Norris-beating driver after 6 months, that's it. You should get binned off. I think you made the case perfectly for when a driver should get more time. I'm just saying the argument exists that some drivers don't deserve the time.
Sergeant.
Disagree.
Mazapan.
Agree.
Did you say Desiree? Matt, the singer?
No, he didn't say desert. And that, I think, brings us nicely to the end, Kristian. You have brought about the end of this show. And to be honest, we did well to survive the last 10 minutes beyond the last shenanigans. But thank you very much to the panel. I do enjoy these midweek drop-ins. I think the reason why I've been determined to do midweek content is because the schedule now, the race schedule we have, including the sprint weekends, really dictates our content. And when we have shows like this where we can just sit down and have a bit of a midweek relax and take stock, we're choosing the content. And well, you can judge us by the results, I guess, of this show. But please go and follow my panel. Kristian Pedersen mercifully isn't on social media, which is why social media is still standing and not in a state of absolute chaos. Go and follow the links in the show notes below to support Steve's wife, Jane, supporting awareness and prevention of domestic violence. And go and follow Matt at MattPT55. The link to Amanda's books, which are romantic novels around Formula One. The link is still there, available to pre-order that. And you can follow me. Why wouldn't you? I'm the best one after all, at Spanners Ready. And please consider supporting us at patreon.com/Missed Apex. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex.